Hello doctors, today we learn on physiology topic nervous mechanism of respiration including with chemical mechanism of respiration. Firstly, it includes some of the centers from the nervous mechanism. Those are your respiratory centers, afferent nerves and efferent nerves. That is your sensory and motor nerves. Your respiratory centers, there are some of the groups of neurons which are under the control like it may be rate, rhythm and force of respiration. So these centers are located in a bilaterally in reticular formation of brain stem. Depending upon situation, brain stem respiratory centers are classified into two groups, that is your medullary centers and pontine centers. Your medullary centers are divided into two groups, dorsal respiratory group of neurons and ventral respiratory group of neurons, that is a DRG and VRG. And in pontine there is apneustic center and pneumotaxic center. If we go entering into its detail, medullary centers DRG, its situation, nucleus of Saltorius present in upper part of medulla. Its function is always inspiratory ramp, that it has autorhythmically and always active. Type of neuron, inspiratory neuron. And VRG, its situation is nucleus ambiguous and nucleus retroambiguous, and the function is active and inactive of forced or quiet breathing. Type of neuron is inspiratory and expiratory neurons. Your pontine centers, apneustic center, situation, nuclei of reticular formation of lower pons, functions, prolonged inspiration and short expiration. Your type of neuron, it is inspiratory neurons, and next is your pneumotactic center. Situation, nuclei of reticular formation of upper pons. Function, it is switching between the inspiration and expiration by inhibiting the inspiration through apneustic center. Type of neurons, neurons of medial and subparabranchial nuclei. And next comes your afferent nerves. These are receives afferent impulses from your peripheral chemoreceptors and baroreceptors, which are branches of your glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves. And then it can causes these stretch receptors of lungs through vagus nerve. So it can modulate the movements of thoracic cage and lungs through efferent nerves fibers. Next, efferent nerves, this pathway leaves the brainstem and then descend into the anterior or the lateral columns of spinal cord and getting terminated into the cervical and thoracic segments of spinal cord. From motor neurons, there are two nerves which are mainly your phrenic nerves, that is C3 to C5, which apply to diaphragm, and intercostal nerves which are T1 to T11, which supply to the external oblique muscles. So this is the nervous mechanism. Then how come you regulation of in chemical mechanism of respiration? So this is can be done by through chemoreceptors. Actually, these receptors are present at the nerve endings, which gives response to changes in chemical constituent of blood. Like in what are the changes? Like hypoxia, it means decreased content of oxygen. Hypercapnia, it means increased content of carbon dioxide, and the change in H plus ion concentration. So types of chemoreceptors, there is central chemoreceptors and peripheral chemoreceptors. Your central chemoreceptors, which are present in the brain, and the situation is mostly present in the deeper part of medulla oblongata, right? Next, and the chemoreceptors are very close contact with the blood and CSF. And the mechanism of action, if increasing the ventilation through chemical regulatory mechanism, and there will be increase in H plus ion concentration in the blood. So it can't stimulate the central chemoreceptors because hydrogen ions from blood cannot cross your blood-brain barrier and CSF. That's what they can't stimulate the chemoreceptors. Next, your and it can also increase the carbon dioxide in blood. That is a hypercapnia. So it can cross the blood-brain barrier and CSF then enters into the interstitial fluid. Then it gives rise to a sum of the equation, that is carbon dioxide forming with some water. It causes carbonic acid that is unstable, that is H2CO3, and gives a H plus ion concentration and bicarbonate ions. Your H plus ions can be stimulated in the central chemoreceptors. From these chemoreceptors, they are sent into the DRG. So that in DRG, they can increase the rate and force. That is a ventilation. And what about the next? Peripheral chemoreceptors. After central chemoreceptors, there are peripheral chemoreceptors. In this, these are present in the aortic arch and carotid. And the mechanism of action, hypoxia, has decrease in oxygen content. It prevents the potassium efflux. This leads to depolarization of glomerulus cells. Then stimulation of peripheral chemoreceptors, afferent impulses via hearing nerves and aortic nerve. Then stimulation of DRG of neurons, efferent impulses to respiratory muscles, and it results in increase in ventilation. So these are the process in chemoreceptors of peripherally, and it can be regulated to the respiration. These are notes for the respiration control of both nervous and chemical. Thanks for watching SPN. If you like my video, like, comment and share it.